You're all very welcome back aboard Steady As She Goes, Fáilte Ar Asherísh. This is episode 8, The Long Watchmen. If you're new to the podcast, don't forget to listen back to all the previous episodes. Thanks as always for all the correspondence during the week, it's genuinely appreciated, and if you're enjoying the podcast, please like, subscribe and share. It really helps us reach more listeners. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at steadyasshegosPod@gmail.com, and you'll also find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube. We had another busy and enjoyable day at the Roster Harbour Maritime Heritage Centre on Saturday. Just a reminder, we're open every week from 12 to 4. Admission is free and it'd be great to see you down there. In this week's episode, it's another busy and fascinating one. We go on watch with Tommy Dover in Wicklow, hear a fine seafaring story from Robert McFadden, and our model of the month features the brave little ship Kerlogue, a vessel whose story still resonates today, and we also have a beautiful song inspired by that very ship. And of course, we'll finish up with our maritime words of the week. Now, to start off this week, we want to point you towards the latest blog from our friends over at Tides and Tales, which explores a fascinating but often overlooked chapter of maritime history, and that's the long-running steamer service between Bristol and Waterford. What follows is just a flavour of the story, and it's well worth reading in full. So when people think about historic sea routes between Ireland and Britain, ports like Liverpool or Holyhead usually dominate the conversation. But for more than a century, another vital connection quietly carried passengers, cargo and livelihoods across the Irish Sea, the Bristol to Waterford steamer service. This link dates back to the early days of steam, when the technology itself was very much experimental. By the 1820s, paddle steamers were already attempting the crossing, and in 1826 a regular scheduled service was established. For Waterford and the wider southeast, this was a genuine lifeline, connecting the region directly with the west of England. Over the decades, a steady procession of steamers worked the route. Ships carried emigrants setting out on new lives, traders moving goods, livestock bound for the English markets, and ordinary people travelling for work or family reasons. Competition was fierce, timetables mattered very much, and reliability could make or break a service. But this was also a dangerous era. Early steam navigation was unforgiving, and not every voyage ended safely. Ships were wrecked, others lost, and every crossing depended on experience, good seamanship, and a fair measure of luck. The service survived well into the 20th century before changing transport patterns and world events finally brought it to an end in the late 1930s, closing more than 100 years of continuous maritime history. We've only scratched the surface here, and the full story, the ships, the companies and the people who depended on this route is explored in detail in Tides and Tales' latest blog. So head over to their website to read it in full and give them a follow on Facebook. We're delighted to recognise their ongoing support of the Steady As She Goes podcast and the Roster Harbour Maritime Heritage Centre. And the Tides and Tales website, and indeed the blog, is a fascinating read and a must for anyone interested in maritime matters. Next, we're heading to Cork and news of a book launch to support the ongoing care of the Mary Stanford lifeboat. And the lifeboat herself, one of East Cork's most enduring symbols of courage, service and community spirit, stands today overlooking Ballycotton as a result of a remarkable restoration effort driven by local commitment, voluntary work and fundraising. That tradition of care and stewardship will be continued on Wednesday the 11th of February, when a new local history publication, Cloyne in the Great War 1914-1918, is launched in the library of the Garryvoe Hotel, marking 90 years since the Mary Stanford's famous rescue of the crew of the light vessel Comet. The RNLB Mary Stanford entered service at Ballycotton in 1930 and earned a lasting place in maritime history on the 11th of February 1936, when she carried out the dramatic rescue of the Comet at Daunt Rock in severe storm conditions. The rescue is regarded as one of the most notable in RNLI history and remains a defining moment in the lifeboat's service. After her retirement in 1959, the Mary Stanford spent many years away from Ballycotton and fell into serious deterioration. Through a determined local campaign and significant voluntary effort, the lifeboat was eventually returned to East Cork and painstakingly restored, ensuring she could be preserved as a permanent public memorial overlooking Ballycotton Harbour. The restoration safeguarded not just a vessel, but a powerful reminder of bravery, sacrifice, and maritime service. Preserving a historic wooden lifeboat, however, is not a once-off achievement. Continuous care and maintenance are essential if the Mary Stanford is to remain protected for future generations. So this book launch has been organised specifically to support that ongoing work, with all proceeds from book sales donated directly towards the lifeboat's upkeep. Written by historian Gary Carney, Clyne in the Great War 1914-18 documents the lives and service of 267 men and 5 women from the Greater Clyne parish, including Ballycotton, Churchtown South, Clyne and Shanagarry, who served during the First World War. The book reflects the same themes of service, sacrifice and community responsibility embodied by the Mary Stanford and her crew. And the launch event begins at 7 p.m. with a reception and refreshments, followed by music from the Rovers, who will perform the Ballad of the Mary Stanford, a very fitting tribute on this important anniversary. The book will be available for purchase on the night and afterwards at Ballymaloe Shop, Broderick's Shops Shanagarry, Centra in Clyne, the Middleton Bookshop, and online via www.kennys.ie. This is a community event rooted in remembrance and responsibility, celebrating the successful restoration of the Mary Stanford and helping to ensure that the work done to save her is protected and sustained into the future. So best of luck with the launch, folks, and well done on the ongoing maintenance and indeed the restoration of that famous lifeboat. Now to search and rescue helicopter news, and the Irish Coast Guard has completed the nationwide changeover of its search and rescue helicopter service this week, marking the start of a new chapter in Irish search and rescue aviation. Waterford became the final base to transition, completing a phased handover to Bristow, Ireland under a new long-term government contract. The service now operates a fleet of Leonardo AW189 helicopters from bases at Waterford, Sligo, Shannon and Dublin Weston, alongside a fixed-wing aircraft based at Shannon. The move also brings to a close the era of the Sikorsky S-92 helicopters, which served Ireland very well for many years and were involved in thousands of life-saving missions. Now, having flown very recently in the AW189s myself, I was hugely impressed by the aircraft and the capability that they bring, and we wish everyone involved every success with the new operation, and we will have more on Coast Guard Search and Rescue Helicopter Service here in a future episode of Steady As She Goes. So following on from our very successful On Watch segments there with John in Rosslare and with Michael Cusick down in Waterford and New Ross, we're heading back up East Coast now towards Wicklow, and we're going to check in with Tommy Dover. Of course, you heard from Tommy in previous episodes of Steady As She Goes with all things maritime there at Wicklow. So you're welcome back, Tommy. Things have been busy enough at Wicklow for the start of the year, have they?
It has, Sean, yeah, and been a lot of disruption with the weather. But we had 6 coasters calling at Wicklow in January. The first caller was Scott Leader. She arrived in from Varberg on New Year's Day, and she discharged packaged timber and departed the following day to load the Kilruth. She's a regular caller to the port. And then a few days later, we had the Wilson Brugge in. She arrived on the 4th from Foynes, and she loaded out a cargo of scrap metal and sailed on the 7th of January bound for Liverpool. Now, we were just looking back through the notes, and her last visit to the port was back in May 2017 when she loaded a similar cargo.
Right,
the next visitor was said Cosmos, and she arrived from Ramsey on the 8th of January to load out round timber at the North Quay. And she sailed the following day for Birkenhead. Now, she returned on the 25th to load another cargo of round timber, again for Birkenhead. She's a lovely coaster. She first made her first debut at Wicklow way back in October 1989 as the Fairan. So she's a regular caller for nearly 4 decades. The next ship we had in was called Wilson Cadiz, and she was making her first call at Wicklow. She arrived on the 22nd from Varberg to discharge a part cargo of timber before backloading a cargo of scrap metal. She departed on the 21st of January, destined for Pasajes in Spain, But I was watching on the voyage on marine traffic, and the weather disrupted our voyage as she had to anchor off Padstow for a couple of days and finally reached Spain on the 30th. So a long trip for them. So the next caller was the Cypriot flagged Talina B. She arrived in from Finland to unload timber. And again, her departure was delayed by bad weather. But on the 25th, she sailed for the Shannon Estuary, and I think she loaded at Limerick. This ship was the Ex-Tina, and it's been a regular caller to Wicklow Port over the years.
Very good.
The next, and I suppose, and then really to get the last caller of the month was the Belgian flagged CL Nagaro. She's only 2 years old. She arrived on the 30th. And again, Storm Chandra delayed her arrival. And this was her first call at Wicklow. She discharged a part cargo of timber from Sweden and then sailed early the following morning for the short run north to Warren Point. She's operated by a Belgian company, Conti Lines, and we've had our sister ship, CL Flanders, in last year. So it's nice to see new ships coming in. Yeah, so Storm Chandra played some part in delaying shipping around. We had the container ship Andromeda J in the bay overnight during the week. I believe she was out of Dublin for Rotterdam. So that's really the traffic at Wicklow. We had 6 ships this month.
Yeah, busy enough. And it's interesting there that you had a first caller, a pretty new ship, as you said, 2 years old, in contrast to the Seg ship, which first visited Wicklow way back in the 1980s. So there's a nice bit of synergy there that you have a stalwart, let's say, still calling in. And then, as you rightly said, it's nice to see those new callers to the port, and then something a little bit different with the container ship there as well. So you've had plenty to keep you going anyway.
Oh yes, very very good month. I really enjoyed it. Now that's part. I think that's, as a hobby, watching ships. This is what you like, the new and the old together. You know, it's just nice, a nice blend.
Absolutely, and that brings me nicely on to some of the stuff you've been putting out on the page recently there, Tommy, and that's the beautiful artwork of Pat Dover, of course, and I've been seeing you be getting some great responses to it there. His artwork is truly exceptional. It's really, really nice, and we're blessed, really. In another part of this episode, we reference Kenneth King. We've got our own Brian Clear down here, of course, and Pat up Wicklow. So there's fantastic artwork around, and it's great to see people still at it and still enjoying it.
It is, and it's great. Pat's my younger brother now. He's been painting for more years than I say now, but he has brought the port to life, especially the old photographs and all. He's put them into colour, and he's brought them into sort of a photographic detailed painting. It's a joy to watch him even work. And
I'd imagine so. Yeah, it's brilliant.
I'm delighted to share them.
Absolutely, yeah, and people are loving them and rightly calling for an exhibition. So we'll have to get working on that maybe between us all.
Yeah, hopefully.
And we'll move on to another Pat now. Of course, the famous Pat Davis. He's as I call him, the mural man. All the lovely murals on the quay there. And it's been recently announced that he's going to be the Grand Marshal in the St. Patrick's Day Parade there in the Wicklow Town Municipal District. So that's a great honour for Pat as well.
It is. It's a nice honour for him, and I think he deserves it immensely. You know, he's been painting 50 years on the pier.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's just it's a whole history, and if anyone comes to Wicklow, it's well worth to come and visit his paintings. You know, it's an absolute it's a unique art gallery on the pier. You're walking past ships. And all types of ships. It's not just coasters or lifeboats and sailing ships. It's an absolute, it's a joy on a summer's day to walk along and see the paintings.
Absolutely, and I'm sure we'll discuss it when we talk to Pat ourselves. But I didn't realise until I read recently that it all started when he actually asked permission to touch up a painting that had been done by the crew member of a ship, a Greek ship, I think, many years ago. So that's a lovely story from start right up to the present, you know.
Yeah, it is, and it's the Eliana. He said at the time that the Gardaí weren't too happy. They looked on it as graffiti. The Greek sailor wanted to leave his mark at Wicklow, and there is a story that I'm sure Pat will tell you that the sailor was fined by the Gardaí.
My God, that's definitely a story for the future.
It is, yeah, and I let him say that. But you know, it's a great way of honoring Pat. He's down there in all types of weather, in cold weather, painting. He's put Wicklow on the map, and it's a fantastic, unique gallery that will be there for generations, really.
Absolutely, yeah, and we wish him all the best with his duties on the day as Grand Marshal. Great to see things all maritime related still progressing, and thanks for keeping an eye out for us there, Tommy. And we'll have you back with us on Watch again on Steady as She Goes very soon.
Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you.
Now it's time for our Model of the Month here on Steady as She Goes, and we've something really special for you this month, ladies and gentlemen. It's a model of the ship, the Curlogue, the very famous motor coaster registered in Wexford away back in 1938. It's a ship that has a long history, and we're really happy to have this little model here of the ship. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined once again by maritime artist and historian Brian Clare to talk about the Curlogue. Welcome back, Brian. How are you?
Not too bad, Sean. Thank you.
So the Curlogue, first of all, we look at the model here, Brian, and there's some footage of it up on our socials if anyone wants to have a look at it. But the model itself is really nice, isn't it?
It's a beautiful little model. It shows that the Curlogue, it's a waterline model, as I say, made by Johnny Walker in Wexford. The detail on it is absolutely terrific. It depicts the model as the Curlogue would have appeared in the 1950s. The colour of the deck and the funnels and all, it's absolutely perfect. She's a beautiful little model.
It's really nice. In stark contrast to our January model of the month, which of course was the huge builder's model of the Connigan Beatrix. And some people think that a model has to be really big, to be impressive. But I think the opposite, actually. This is a lovely little model, and that makes the detail even more important, but also even more recognizable, because when you look at this model, no matter how long you look at it, you go back and you find something else, another little detail. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Look at the detail that Johnny Walker, who made the model, into the little ship's lifeboats. He's actually got the thwarts and the oars in the lifeboats.
That's right,
as well tiny. As the Welland davits now for low. It's beautiful. Absolutely.
And it would be easy for a model maker. Now, I'm not doing a disservice to model makers because they wouldn't do this, but it would be easy maybe not to put those oars in, or maybe just make a little effort at it. Yeah. But Johnny, and we're lucky that we have lots of models here that have been built by Johnny, and he's going to join us for an episode in the future, hopefully. But for Johnny to take that effort and put those little oars, and they really are tiny, and anyone who comes down to see the model, I think, will be very impressed by them. But it's beautiful there. It sits as a waterline model. It gives it a bit of context as well.
Oh yeah, and look at the crew. You've even got two of the crew members on deck.
Yeah. And they're also natural in the way they would have been standing. Yeah, it really is lovely. It's a lovely size. There's so much detail in it, and there has been so much care put into the making of this model. And as I say, we've lots of Johnny's models on display here, and it really is lovely. The ship itself then, Brian, she had a big history.
She was built in a Dutch shipyard near Rotterdam, and for the Wexford Steamship Company, which is J.J. Stafford and Sons. She was 142 foot long. She was only 335 gross registered tonnage, and she would have had a crew 10, maybe 11 sometimes. Mm-hmm. And she had a very low, what we call freeboard. That's the distance between the water and the deck, very low, which, as it turned out to be, came in very useful when she was rescuing the German sailors.
Yeah.
She had an interesting history during the war. She had a rough time during the war. Several times she was attacked. In April 1941, she was en route to Barry, South Wales. Captain Samuel Owens picked up an SOS from another coaster called the Wild Rose, which had been severely damaged after being attacked by enemy aircraft. The captain and the crew, which totaled 13, were taken on board the Curlogue, and the Curlogue towed the Wild Rose to Rossler Strand, where she was beached to prevent her sinking.
And that in itself, for like, this is not a tug we're talking about that was designed for towing ships. No. This is a little cargo ship, and here she is towing other ships around the place to help them.
Yeah.
You know,
in the war, fully aware of the risks she was taking,
Because
could
that would have slowed her
attacked.
progress
Yeah,
down. It would
yeah,
have drawn more attention to her.
yeah.
Looking from an aircraft, let's say, what's going on here? Why are these towing each other? At that time there was a lot of suspicion around about what ships were doing. So that very act just kind of shows you what was going on in the minds of the people who were commanding and running this ship.
She did get damaged in October 1941. She hit a mine in Cardigan Bay.
Okay.
But the damage wasn't severe or anything, so it was obviously repaired.
Yeah.
But later, in October 1943, she was attacked by an RAF planes from a Polish squadron.
Okay.
And they were flying Mosquito planes 130 miles off the South Irish coast. She was unarmed, she had lights on, and ERA in big letters painted on the sides of the ship and on the deck.
Yeah.
She was damaged, but she managed to make cove. Several of the crew were injured, including the Captain Des Fortune, who both legs were fractured.
Goodness me. And the fact that she was so aware of what was going on, the air was painted on the decks and sides, she was fully illuminated. Was it just wanton kind of skullduggery, or is there any chance that would have been a mistake, do you think?
In a report that was found later from the squadron, they said they mistook her identity for a French ship that shouldn't have been in that position.
Right, okay. I suppose that is kind of believable. But ERA doesn't say Francais either. But look, we're not here to judge what was going on at the time. And then we move on
to December 1943. Little Kerlog was on her way back from Lisbon with a cargo of oranges, spotted by a German plane who signalled her to follow this German plane, and she altered course into the Bay of Biscay, about 350 miles south of the Fastnet. And there they came across the aftermath of what was a big sea battle between German naval ships and British naval ships. After 10 grueling hours, they managed to save 168 German sailors from the sea.
Now, 168 people going on this size of a ship. I believe in reports they were just everywhere. There was people everywhere.
Oh, yeah. In the cabins, in the engine room. Some of them, the more seriously ones, were put in the engine room where it was warm and they could get some heat. But every part of the ship. And what's also you have to bear in mind, the crew of the Kerlog numbered at that time 10. So 168 German sailors could have taken over the ship
without
any time they wanted to, But they were so grateful for being rescued. They didn't even attempt to. They asked for Captain Donoghue, would he take him to France, and he said no. The British then wanted Captain Donoghue to bring them into Fishguard, so that they could clear their Navy cert. But he refused to take him into Fishguard because there were so many badly injured. They needed treatment ASAP, so he headed for Cove. And they arrived in Cove late on New Year's Eve. The surviving German sailors, I think 4 of them died.
That's right. I think
on the voyage, but the surviving German sailors were transferred to the Curragh internment camp.
It just shows you, they were asked to go, obviously, to France by the Germans, and the fact that Captain Donoghue's refusal to that request was so well respected just shows you how grateful they were. And then, obviously, the excuse given, or the reason, I suppose, to be fair, was that there was so many injured people on board that he needed to get them to Cove. Now, when you think about it, Fishguard, Cove, probably wouldn't be a whole lot of difference, but Captain Donoghue knew what he was doing.
He knew it.
And he knew where these lads would have ended up. And, Ireland is a neutral country. He probably wasn't thinking too much in terms of war, but these lads had just been dragged out of a hugely traumatic experience. And my thoughts on it is that Captain Donoghue didn't want to put them through any more hardship, really. And we've a lovely connection to Captain Donoghue here in Rosslare. Paul Butler had been in touch with us a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling us that Captain Donoghue was summoned to Milford Haven for a bit of an interview and a chat, I suppose, at the hands of the British. And now, although Captain Donoghue was from Waterford, his story also has a strong connection, and possibly overlooked one, to Rosslare Harbour, and that link was through his family. So his nephew, the late Tom Butler of Cawdor Street, who worked with Irish Rail, was actually named after Captain Tom Donoghue. And another came through marriage, as Donoghue's first wife was related to John Cody of Rosslare Harbour, and she even served at John Cody's parents' wedding down in Waterford. Now, these connections are more than incidental. After that Kerlogue incident, when Donoghue was summoned to Milford Haven by the British Navy, he broke his journey at Rosslare and stayed overnight with the Cody family, so firmly placing his international wartime story within the local Rosslare Harbour community. It's a small industry, it's a small world, but another little connection for us here in Rosslare and Wexford, because she's a Wexford ship, that Captain Donoghue, on his way from Waterford over to Milford Haven, stopped off here in Rosslare, and it's another little step in the journey, which I think is nice to include, So where do we go from that then, Brian?
Well, after the war, the Kerlogue continued trading for Staffers of Wexford until 1958, when she was sold to a Norwegian company and renamed Munken, M-U-N-K-E-N, in July 1960, on a voyage from Bergen to a place called Moss in Norway. A cargo of grain shifted and she capsized off Lindesnes in Norway. Mm-hmm. All the crew were saved by another ship happened to be passing close by, and all the crew were saved. But this was a sad end to such a fine little ship. Absolutely.
After all she endured and all she went through and all she survived, and I don't mean to trivialise this in any way, but a simple thing like a cargo shift was ultimately her demise. Yeah. But I suppose the contrast to that is that all the crew were saved, because this ship was very resilient, but her crew, and I know that would have changed over time, obviously, her crew was as resilient and as tough and as kind and as brave. So the fact that they were spared, I suppose, is really good, and it's a nice end to a bitter tale when she was lost. Well,
I feel that when the official maritime history of Ireland is written, I'm sure the Kerlogue and her brave crew will feature strongly.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, Brian.
And we at Rosslare Harbour Maritime Heritage Centre are so proud and delighted to display the beautiful model kindly donated by Johnny Walker.
Absolutely, it's a real gem in the treasure trove that we have here. And as I say, folks, we will be having Johnny in for a chat here. We have a multitude of models on display here that Johnny has so delicately and artistically put together. Really, they're lovely. So for now, that's our model of the month for February. Thanks to Brian. We'll be back again in March with another model of the month for you. But don't forget to call down and see all these beautiful models and the rest of our artefacts, and of course Brian's beautiful artwork here at the Maritime Heritage Centre every Saturday. Admission is completely free, and we'd love to see you. Now, to round off our segment on the Kerlogue for this episode of Steady As She Goes, we have a very special treat for you, and you're going to hear a beautiful song very shortly called The Long Watchmen. And I am absolutely delighted to be joined now by the man who wrote that song quite a few years ago now, Niall Teague, to speak about why he wrote the song and what inspired him to do so. You're very welcome to Steady As She Goes, Niall.
Thanks very much, Sean.
So, Niall, when did you write the song, and if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of a background into it?
Yeah, no problem, Sean. This song I wrote at the beginning of COVID, and I was studying songwriting, and I'd call myself a bit of a songwriter, and I'd always be on the hunt for an interesting story, and I have a kind of a general interest in Irish history. My neighbour and landlord, when I was kind of coming up as a student in Galway was in the Mercantile Marine, and he would have been active during the Second World War. And so he used to be telling us tales of the out in the seas and maybe being chased by U-boats and all the countries he'd been to, you know. And he was a man from Hereford, and you know, in his 80s, and I used to think it was wonderful to go in and talk to him and spend time with him. He had a great worldly view of everything. So I tried to write a song about this old man and his time at sea, and to research what it was like. I went into the library and I was looking for books, and I came across a book called The Long Watch by Frank Ford. And again, I got stuck into that book anyway. It's a very factual book, but fascinating. And in that book, I found the Curlogue. And I'd never heard of this boat. I'd never heard of any of its feats or its crew, where it was from. But I kind of became more and more fascinated by this ship and the story of its time at sea, especially during the war years. And so that's where the song began.
Fantastic. And you're a Belfast native, I know yourself, so a huge section of maritime history. Of course, it's probably and is most well known for the likes of Titanic and stuff, but apart from that, there was a huge amount of Belfast seafarers, of course, at sea during those times, and still are today, and they play a huge part in maritime history. And you mentioned Frank Ford's book there, and I think it's very, very hard to get that book nowadays, so anyone who has a copy is very privileged. And it's a lovely book and really, really well written. And I suppose Ireland's involvement in the war, thankfully, was obviously neutral, but there were so many good deeds done. But it's very hard to get past something like the Curlogue and how great that feat was. So that brought you into a great piece of research then, Niall. So I'm sure you were fascinated by that.
Well, yeah, and I think that the thing that struck me most about the Curlogue, and I suppose the whole fleet at that time was, it seemed to me, you know, it was run on a shoestring, and they had, you know, bought these boats that were quite inadequate for the job or for the purpose.
Absolutely.
And they made it all work at a time of great peril and danger to themselves, you know. And these boys were just trying to earn a few bob and do their best to go out into a wartime Atlantic sea against the odds and bring the goods up and down.
Sure, to keep the country going, really, you know.
Keeping things going. And the other, but in particular, the rescue, the story of their heroism, and they rescued both sides, you know.
Yeah.
And I just thought there's a great humanity about this little boat. You know, it represents so much. Like I think that's so important today, even, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the ordinary man we're talking about, you know. So he's neutral, as you say, and he's just trying to get on with things. But it was a great shining light of humanity. It didn't matter who you were, you know, they'd turn around and they'd pick you up. You know, even if it was at risk to their own lives, you know.
Absolutely. You mentioned the ordinary man there, Niall, and you know, obviously Captain Donoghue in this case was, you know, there's no words to describe how good he was and how brave he was, but there was a whole crew involved there, and you've written the song from the view of Tom O'Neill, who was an AB, an able seafarer. And my point is that, you know, when history is written, they often talk about the captain or the chief engineer or whoever was in charge, but Tom was a sailor, a Wexford man, of course, and you chose to write it from Tom's perspective, which I love. And why was that then?
When I kind of set out to write the song, the first thing I did was I wanted to know, was there anyone in the crew left?
Yeah. And
it led me to Tom. Like, unfortunately, even I think at the time I wrote, he was no longer with us.
Yeah.
But I kind of still felt it was a good idea to centre it on a young man, you know, and possibly it meant the most to him to get work and to start a new trade. Yes. At that time. A young man maybe observing the goings-on of the world at the time as well, you know, possibly less influenced by propaganda of any particular side. Again, he was just trying to make his way in the world. I felt compelled to hone in on him, you know.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's really nice that you've done that. And, you know, you touched on the spirit of humanity there. And I know in the rest of your songwritings that's something that you passionately care about. But you had so many examples of that. And it's very well told through the song. You know, the fact that the ship wasn't heading the way of the disaster. They responded to the pilot of the aircraft dipping his wings. And then you had, you know, the horrendous condition. And for anybody, you know, listening in, as we said in an earlier part of the piece with marine artist Brian Clare, this ship was no bigger than a fishing trawler, really, you know, down there in the Atlantic. With the sea was on fire, basically, and there was terrible disaster scene all around, and they endured that for a long number of hours, picking bodies and people out of the sea. But then you had the Germans on board the ship, who at any time could have overpowered the crew, and respected each wish of the crew members. In fact, helped them. I know they helped the chief engineer turning valves and bits and pieces. So there was so much of that spirit of humanity that you speak about, and I think you convey that very well in the song, and it's very deliberate, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And as I say, it's something that, you know, it's maybe one of the reasons, again, I was compelled to write it, because I think such a story is very relevant today, you know. The actions of the members of the crew of the Carlogue, you know, should be celebrated and used as an example.
Absolutely, you know, yeah, it's a good point.
Carry yourself in this world. But I suppose another wee thing I wanted to mention is about the song as well. Is, well, there's a few things, Sean, and I mentioned, like, it was my first venture into a maritime kind of a song, and there's one or two words that your listeners might perk their ears, and that was mercantile. I made hames of it. So somebody pulled me up on that, and then when they were attacked in the song, this is another great thing about the song. They were attacked by the RAF.
That's right.
And yet when they found crew belonging to the Royal Navy in trouble, they rescued them.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, that's something else. But anyway, strafed, I think, is the word, to be attacked from an aircraft up above. And so apologies for that one. I haven't got round to re-recording it, John.
Well, look, our lads are very particular about details and stuff like that. But what I'm going to say is that's called artistic license, Niall. And
we call it, yeah. we blame it on my accent.
And I tell you what, you can pay us back by the next time you're recording the song. We'll do it down in the Maritime Centre here in Rosslare, and that'll be your dues paid back then.
I would love that. The song is accompanied by a little video, if any of your listeners are interested, and there's a little story behind that as well. So there was a maritime artist by the name of Kenneth King, and he was commissioned to do paintings of the fleet, including the Carlogue.
Yeah.
And so I think they might be in the National Museum.
That's right, Jed. And the video is lovely. It's really nice, and we'll be putting a link in the notes of the podcast for the link. And Kenneth, of course, was a great friend of ours here at the Maritime Centre as well. You know, but they're lovely paintings, aren't they?
They're fantastic. And I contacted, I think it was the gallery maybe that Kenneth was associated with, and his wife put me in contact with his daughter Katrina, and Katrina then was able to. She agreed to send me on images of his paintings, so she gave me permission to use them in the video, and it was very supportive altogether, you know.
That's really good.
And like yourself, you know, she wanted people to know about this little boat, the Carlogue, and I thought that was very kind of them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think with a subject like this, and to be fair with all things maritime, it's a very small community, and everyone kind of looks after each other and wants to promote these stories because they are so important to our history, not just as a maritime nation, but as a nation in general. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that this stuff should be taught in schools, and, you know, look at our own history maybe before we look too further afield, you know.
Oh, definitely. Like, I mean, I was surprised even, you know, as I said, I studied history at school, and I'd always be digging for stories in Irish history, and I'd never heard of the Carlogue. Like, kids at school would love to hear the tale of the Carlogue. And the rescue missions that they did, you know.
Absolutely. Are you still gigging and writing songs now?
I'm gigging away, and I've a new album coming out now this year. I'm supporting Sharon Shannon now next Friday.
Fantastic.
The Mermaid Arts Centre, I think it's called, in Bray.
Excellent.
And we have a couple of shows around the country. So yeah, really excited about putting out a new album.
Brilliant.
And the last album has a few songs. There's one or two maritime songs on there now on the last album. If any of your listeners would like to listen to them, Martin and Tom is a song I'm really proud of. It's about a father and son. They're two fishermen, and that's a lovely story too.
Fantastic. Yeah, we might get you on to talk about that when the album comes out, if you'd be up for that, Niall.
Absolutely.
I fell into a little bit of a rabbit hole of yours recently as well, and I was I can't recall the name of the song about the potatoes now, but I absolutely love it.
That's the homegrown potatoes.
That's
right.
The one. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I love it. It's going to be my new ringtone, I think.
Oh, sure. That's a good one for St. Patrick's Day.
Look, Niall, it's been absolutely brilliant to have you on here on Steady as She Goes with us. Thank you so much for the permission to play the song as well on the podcast. We'll definitely be promoting your shows and your new album, of course. And we'd really love to maybe get 5 minutes with you, or a little bit longer, actually, because when you come to Rosslare, we kind of hold on to you for a little while. But if you'd be up for a visit down to us, we could maybe get a little bit of an audience and have a few songs with you at the museum. It'd be brilliant.
I would love that.
Great to hear. Look, thanks a million again, Niall, for your time, and we'll be playing the song here now for the listeners. They're in for a treat, and as we say to all our listeners, steady as she goes.
Thanks, Sean.
I am a bold young Wexford man, Tom O'Neill's my name. My father was a mariner, and I long to be the same. I joined a few on a coastal crew for the mercantile marine, while a foreign war not far from shore was fought in the skies and seas. There were men from Cork and Dublin, from Limerick and Wexford town, and we sailed each day into the fray, far from solid ground. We shipped our load through a treacherous road, and then returned again. We are the unsung heroes. We are the long watchmen. We are the long watchmen. For essential supplies, we risked our lives as we plied the seas alone. And we sailed the star of a makeshift fleet on the good MV Kerlogue. As a young AB, it meant the world to me when the work at home was scarce. I could make a bob on a steady job, my fears I did disperse. We were shafted from high by the RAF, we were rent by shrapnel sore. The cannon shells fell through our decks, but lodged in the coal cargo. We hit German mines that blasted our sides. How we survived, I'll never know. A neutral ship, she was brightly lit with an armour of green and gold. There were men from Cork and Dublin, from Limerick and Wexford town, and we sailed each day into the fray, far from solid ground. We shipped our load through a treacherous road, and then returned again. We are the unsung heroes. We are the long watchmen. We are the long watchmen. In December on the Lisbon run, Biscay was was bitter cold. We were circled by a long-range craft, signalling save our souls. The captain was brave Donahue, and he honoured the plea. And we made our way over towering waves to the appalling scene. The sea was strewn with a German crew. There were bodies and flotsam. With our hands and hooks we hauled them in till the ship was low and rammed. These shivering men, they filled the decks, the wheel and engine room. 168 we saved from the cold Atlantic's doom. There were men from Cork and Dublin, from Limerick and Wexford town, and we sailed each day into the fray, far from solid ground. We shipped our load through a treacherous road, and then returned again. We are the unsung heroes. We are the Long Watchmen. We are the Long Watchmen. Now hold I stroll by Crescent Quay, and I think of days gone by. And on a stone I read the names of the brave young men who died. For a cargo of souls, wheat and coal, they risked their lives at sea. A debt we owe to the ship Kerlog and the mercantile marine. There were men from Cork and Dublin, from Limerick and Wexford town, and we sailed each day into the fray, far from solid ground. We shipped our load through a treacherous road, and then returned again. We are the unsung heroes. We are the Long Watchmen. We are the Long Watchmen.
This episode of Steady As She Goes is dedicated to the brave little ship Kerlog and her crews, who amongst other great feats heroically rescued 168 injured and shipwrecked German sailors from the Bay of Biscay on the 29th of December 1943. The crew of the Kerlog on that particular day were Captain Tom Donoghue of Dungarvan, Chief Officer Dennis Valenci of Dublin, Second Officer Patrick Whelan of Wexford, Chief Engineer Eric Giggins of London, Second Engineer Joseph Donoghue of Wexford, Third Engineer Gary Roach of Wexford, Boatswain John Chum Roach of Wexford, Tom Granell of Wexford, Dick Roach of Wexford, and Tom O'Neill of Wexford. Aresh Day Gareva Hanamacha Dealish. Now, to round off our segment on the Kerlog for this episode of Steady As She Goes, we have a very special treat for you, and you're going to hear a beautiful song very shortly called The Long Watchmen. And I am absolutely delighted to be joined now by the man who wrote that song quite a few years ago now, Niall Teague, to speak about why he wrote the song and what inspired him to do so. You're very welcome to Steady As She Goes, Niall.
Thanks very much, Sean.
So, Niall, when did you write the song, and if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of a background into it?
Yeah, no problem, Sean. So, this song I wrote, I think it was about the beginning of COVID, and I was studying songwriting, and I'd call myself a bit of a songwriter, and I'd always be on the hunt for an interesting story, and I have a kind of a general interest in Irish history, and my neighbour and landlord, when I was kind of coming up as a student in Galway, was in the mercantile marine, and he would have been active during the Second World War. And so he used to be telling us tales of the out in the seas and maybe being chased by U-boats and all the countries he'd been to, you know. And he was a man from Hertford, and you know, in his 80s, and I used to think it was wonderful to go in and talk to him and spend time with him. He had a great worldly view of everything. And so I tried to write a song about this old man and his time at sea, and to research what it was like. I went into the library and I was looking for books, and I came across a book called The Long Watch by Frank Ford. And I got stuck into that book anyway. It's a very factual book, but fascinating. And in that book, I found the Curlogue. And I'd never heard of this boat. I'd never heard of any of its feats or its crew, where it was from. But I kind of became more and more fascinated by this ship and the story of its time at sea, especially during the war years. And so that's where the song began.
Fantastic. And you're a Belfast native, I know yourself, so a huge section of maritime history. Of course, it's probably and is most well known for the likes of Titanic and stuff, but apart from that, there was a huge amount of Belfast seafarers, of course, at sea during those times, and still are today, and they play a huge part in maritime history. And you mentioned Frank Ford's book there, and I think it's very, very hard to get that book nowadays, so anyone who has a copy is very privileged. And it's a lovely book and really, really well written. And I suppose Ireland's involvement in the war, thankfully, was obviously neutral, but there were so many good deeds done. But it's very hard to get past something like the Curlogue and how great that feat was. So that brought you into a great piece of research then, Niall. So I'm sure you were fascinated by that.
Well, yeah, and I think that the thing that struck me most about the Curlogue, and I suppose the whole fleet at that time was, it seemed to me, you know, it was run on a shoestring, and they had, you know, bought these boats that were quite inadequate for the job or for the purpose.
Absolutely.
And they made it all work at a time of great peril and danger to themselves, you know. And these boys were just trying to earn a few bob and do their best to go out into a wartime Atlantic sea against the odds and bring the goods up and down.
Sure, to keep the country going, really, you know.
Keeping things going. And the other, but in particular, the rescue, the story of their heroism, and they rescued both sides, you know.
Yeah.
And I just thought there's a great humanity about this little boat. You know, it represents so much. Like I think that's so important today, even, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the ordinary man we're talking about, you know. So he's neutral, as you say, and he's just trying to get on with things. But it was a great shining light of humanity. It didn't matter who you were, you know, they'd turn around and they'd pick you up. You know, even if it was at risk to their own lives, you know.
Absolutely. You mentioned the ordinary man there, Niall, and you know, obviously Captain Donoghue in this case was, you know, there's no words to describe how good he was and how brave he was, but there was a whole crew involved there. And you've written the song from the view of Tom O'Neill, who was an AB, an able seafarer. And my point is that, you know, when history is written, they often talk about the captain or the chief engineer or whoever was in charge, but Tom was a sailor, a Wexford man, of course, and you chose to write it from Tom's perspective, which I love. And why was that then?
When I kind of set out to write the song, the first thing I did was I wanted to know, was there anyone in the crew left?
Yeah. And
it led me to Tom. Like, unfortunately, even I think at the time I wrote, he was no longer with us.
Yeah.
But I kind of still felt it was a good idea to centre it on a young man, you know, and possibly it meant the most to him to get work and to start a new trade. Yes. At that time. A young man maybe observing the goings-on of the world at the time as well, you know, possibly less influenced by propaganda of any particular side. Again, he was just trying to make his way in the world. I felt compelled to hone in on him, you know.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's really nice that you've done that. And, you know, you touched on the spirit of humanity there. And I know in the rest of your songwritings that's something that you passionately care about. But you had so many examples of that. And it's very well told through the song. You know, the fact that the ship wasn't heading the way of the disaster. They responded to the pilot of the aircraft dipping his wings. And then you had, you know, the horrendous condition. And for anybody, you know, listening in, as we said in an earlier part of the piece with marine artist Brian Clare, this ship was no bigger than a fishing trawler, really, you know, down there in the Atlantic. With the sea was on fire, basically, and there was terrible disaster scene all around, and they endured that for a long number of hours, picking bodies and people out of the sea. But then you had the Germans on board the ship, who at any time could have overpowered the crew and respected each wish of the crew members. In fact, helped them. I know they helped the chief engineer turning valves and bits and pieces. So there was so much of that spirit of humanity that you speak about, and I think you convey that very well in the song, and it's very deliberate, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And as I say, it's something that, you know, it's maybe one of the reasons, again, I was compelled to write it, because I think such a story is very relevant today, you know. The actions of the members of the crew of the Carlogue, you know, should be celebrated and used as an example.
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah, it's a good point.
Carry yourself in this world. But I suppose another wee thing I wanted to mention is about the song as well is, well, there's a few things, Sean, and I mentioned, like, it was my first venture into a maritime kind of a song, and there's one or two words that your listeners might perk their ears, and that was mercantile. I made hames of it. So somebody pulled me up on that, and then when they were attacked in the song, this is another great thing about the song. They were attacked by the RAF.
That's right.
And yet when they found crew belonging to the Royal Navy in trouble, they rescued them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's something else. But anyway, strafed, I think, is the word, to be attacked from an aircraft up above. And so apologies for that one. I haven't got round to re-recording it, John.
Well, look, our lads are very particular about details and stuff like that. But what I'm going to say is that's called artistic license, Niall. And
we call it, yeah. we blame it on my accent.
And I tell you what, you can pay us back by the next time you're recording the song. We'll do it down in the Maritime Centre here in Rosslare, and that'll be your dues paid back then.
I would love that. The song is accompanied by a little video, if any of your listeners are interested, and there's a little story behind that as well. So there was a maritime artist by the name of Kenneth King, and he was commissioned to do paintings of the fleet, including the Carlogue.
Yeah.
And so I think they might be in the National Museum.
That's right, Jed. And the video is lovely. It's really nice, and we'll be putting a link in the notes of the podcast for the link. And Kenneth, of course, was a great friend of ours here at the Maritime Centre as well. You know, but they're lovely paintings, aren't they?
They're fantastic. And I contacted, I think it was the gallery maybe that Kenneth was associated with, and his wife put me in contact with his daughter Katrina, and Katrina then was able to. She agreed to send me on images of his paintings, so she gave me permission to use them in the video, and it was very supportive altogether, you know.
That's really good.
And like yourself, you know, she wanted people to know about this little boat, the Carlogue, and I thought that was very kind of them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think with a subject like this, and to be fair with all things maritime, it's a very small community, and everyone kind of looks after each other and wants to promote these stories because they are so important to our history, not just as a maritime nation, but as a nation in general. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that this stuff should be taught in schools, and, you know, look at our own history maybe before we look too further afield, you know.
Oh, definitely. Like, I mean, I was surprised even, you know, as I said, I studied history at school, and I'd always be digging for stories in Irish history, and I'd never heard of the Carlogue. Like, kids at school would love to hear the tale of the Carlogue and the rescue missions that they did, you know.
Absolutely. Are you still gigging and writing songs now?
I'm gigging away, and I've a new album coming out now this year. I'm supporting Sharon Shannon now next Friday.
Fantastic.
The Mermaid Arts Centre, I think it's called, in Bray.
Excellent.
And we have a couple of shows around the country. So yeah, really excited about putting out a new album.
Brilliant.
And the last album has a few songs. There's one or two maritime songs on there now on the last album. If any of your listeners would like to listen to them, Martin and Tom is a song I'm really proud of. It's about a father and son. They're two fishermen, and that's a lovely story too.
Fantastic. Yeah, we might get you on to talk about that when the album comes out, if you'd be up for that, Niall.
Absolutely.
I fell into a little bit of a rabbit hole of yours recently as well, and I was I can't recall the name of the song about the potatoes now, but I absolutely love it.
That's the homegrown potatoes.
That's
right.
The one. Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I love it. It's going to be my new ringtone, I think.
Oh, sure. That's a good one for St. Patrick's Day.
Look, Niall, it's been absolutely brilliant to have you on here on Steady as She Goes with us. Thank you so much for the permission to play the song as well on the podcast. We'll definitely be promoting your shows and your new album, of course. And we'd really love to maybe get 5 minutes with you, or a little bit longer, actually, because when you come to Rosslare, we kind of hold on to you for a little while. But if you'd be up for a visit down to us, we could maybe get a little bit of an audience and have a few songs with you at the museum. It'd be brilliant.
I would love that.
Great to hear. Look, thanks a million again, Niall, for your time, and we'll be playing the song here now for the listeners. They're in for a treat, and as we say to all our listeners, steady as she goes.
Thanks, Sean.
I am a bold young Wexford man, Tom O'Neill's my name. My father was a mariner, and I long to be the same. I joined a few on a coaster crew for the mercantile marine, while a foreign war not far from shore was fought in the skies and seas. There were men from Cork and Dublin, from Limerick and Wexford town, and we sailed each day into the fray, far from solid ground. We shipped our load through a treacherous road, and then returned again. We are the unsung heroes. We are the long watchmen. We are the long watchmen. For essential supplies, we risked our lives as we plied the seas alone. And we sailed the star of a makeshift fleet on the good MV Kerlogue. As a young AB, it meant the world to me when the work at home was scarce. I could make a bob on a steady job, my fears I did disperse. We were shafted from high by the RAF, we were rent by shrapnel sore. The cannon shells fell through our decks, but lodged in the coal cargo. We hit German mines that blasted our sides. How we survived, I'll never know. A neutral ship, she was brightly lit with an armour of green and gold. There were men from Cork and Dublin, from Limerick and Wexford town, and we sailed each day into the fray, far from solid ground. We shipped our load through a treacherous road, and then returned again. We are the unsung heroes. We are the long watchmen. We are the long watchmen. In December on the Lisbon run, Biscay was bitter cold. captain was brave Donahue, and he honoured the plea. And we made our way over towering waves to the appalling scene. The sea was strewn with a German crew. There were bodies and flotsam. With our hands and hooks we hauled them in till the ship was low and rammed. These shivering men, they filled the decks, the wheel and engine room. 168 we saved from the cold Atlantic's doom. There were men from Cork and Dublin, from Limerick and Wexford town, and we sail each day into the fray, far from solid ground. We shipped our load through a treacherous road, and then returned again. We are the unsung heroes. We are the Long Watchmen. We are the Long Watchmen. Now old I stroll by Crescent Quay, and I think of days gone by. And on a stone I read the names of the brave young men who died. For a cargo of souls, wheat and coal, they risked their lives at sea. A debt we owe to the ship Kerlog and the mercantile marine. There were men from Cork and Dublin, from Limerick and Wexford town, and we sail each day into the fray, far from solid ground. We shipped our load through a treacherous road, and then returned again. We are the unsung heroes. We are the Long Watchmen. We are the Long Watchmen.
This episode of Steady As She Goes is dedicated to the brave little ship Kerlog and her crews, who amongst other great feats heroically rescued 168 injured and shipwrecked German sailors from the Bay of Biscay on the 29th of December 1943. The crew of the Kerlog on that particular day were Captain Tom Donoghue of Dungarvan, Chief Officer Dennis Valency of Dublin, Second Officer Patrick Whelan of Wexford, Chief Engineer Eric Giggins of London, Second Engineer Joseph Donoghue of Wexford, Third Engineer Gary Roach of Wexford, Boatswain John Chum Roach of Wexford, Tom Granell of Wexford, Dick Roach of Wexford, and Tom O'Neill of Wexford. Aresh Day Gareba Hanamacha Dealish. For this segment of Steady As She Goes, we're bringing you a brand new slot called Seafaring Stories, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Robert McFadden, a member of our group here at the Roster Harbour Maritime Heritage Centre, but a man that spent a lot of his life at sea, and indeed in probably an unusual role now as we look back. He was a radio officer, and of course that role no longer exists. So you're very welcome to Steady As She Go, Robert.
Thank you.
And we'll start off, I suppose, by talking about your early life. And you grew up in Holt, is that right?
That's right, yeah. I grew up in Holt when it was a small fishing village.
A little bit bigger nowadays.
It's manic out there now.
And you were always messing around in small boats and stuff, were you?
I was, yeah. I was always keen on boating, sailing. And Dad actually built me an 8-foot sailing dinghy. And had great fun on that. Very good. And your dad went to sea as well, is that right, Robert? He did, yeah. He went to sea, and he was at sea during the First World War. He worked his way up to second mate, and he's doing across the Atlantic during the times of the submarines and that. So
tough times, yeah. Fair play. So when did you first go to sea, or how did you get interested in it first, I suppose?
Well, I was kind of interested in electronics, and I was interested in the sailing and all that. So I went to a what do you call them, a careers guidance crowd, and they did their things on me and said, "Oh, you should be a dentist," which no chance. A jeweler or an architect. I said, "Well, I want to be a radio officer." "Oh, what's that?" So then my dad found Atlantic College, which was in Leeson Park in Dublin, and so I went there for a few years, did the course, did theory and practical, City and Guilds, and eventually qualified, and then went off to sea, joined Marconi's.
Very good. And what year was that?
It'd been 1974.
Right. Okay. So and Marconi was your employer then, as such. You were working for them.
You worked for Marconi's, and they sent you off to various ships. You could get beautiful ships that were practically new off the blocks, but you could get some rust buckets that were were not the best, shall we say.
Yeah. And was there many in your cohort, let's say, at that time? Was it a popular career? Obviously, career guidance didn't know a whole lot about it, but
it was. I wouldn't say it was that popular. There was Atlantic College that I went to, and then there was Kevin Street College in Dublin, and there was another one. I'm not sure whether it was in Cork or Limerick. There was another college that did the radio officer course. And
then Marconi, you worked for them, and then they assigned you to a shipping company or an individual ship, was it?
An individual ship. You'd go out for, you'd get the phone call, "Oh, you're joining wherever." You'd go to Dublin Airport and fly off.
Yeah. And was it Irish shipping that you went to first, or was it somebody else?
No, I worked for Shell. I was on a Shell tanker, a Texaco tanker. Then I did a couple of Irish shipping ships, and then did a trip with Harrison's, and there was some other companies, can't remember now, Stagline.
Yeah, all very famous historical companies, I suppose. Yeah. Some of them are still operating, obviously, the likes of Shell and that. So then, the day-to-day duties then, or the role of the radio officer on board, obviously, as I said in the intro, it's a role that no longer exists now, probably due to automation, and you might tell us a little bit more about that later. But the role then of the radio officer on board, how did it all work?
Well, you'd go on watch at 8 in the morning. You did 8 hours during the day. You did 4 hours, 8 to 12, and then you did 2 hours between, I think it was 4 and 8 in the evening, and then you did 2 other hours, which meant that you could suit your watch to the conditions for communications. So during the day, frequencies wouldn't get as far as they would at night.
All right.
Because of the ionosphere bounces the radio signal off. So during the day, it lowers, so the signal bounces less.
Yeah.
So if you needed to get long range, well, you could come on watch the early hours of the morning if you wanted.
Yeah.
Basically, you'd listen to what they call traffic lists. These were a list of ships that coast stations had messages for. So if you were going, say, to Japan from the UK, you'd be listening out to the Japanese coast radio station, and if they had a message for you, then you'd contact them and get the message. The biggest station in the world was Portishead Radio, which was on the in the UK, and it dealt worldwide with ships, and it was. If they had a message for you, you'd contact them, and they'd give you, your turn 5. So each turn was approximately 5 minutes. So you'd be waiting 25 minutes for your turn to come up.
Okay.
And then you'd send or receive the message. And
with the amount of ships at that time, and it being the biggest in the world, there would have been a long list, I'd imagine, each day. Then,
they'd send these traffic lists, and they sent. British ships were on the even hour, and foreign ships would be on the odd hour. So the list might go on for 20 minutes, and they'd send each call sign twice.
Okay.
So you'd listen in, and as I say, if there was something there, then we also basically then you'd be on watch, listening in on the frequency of 500 kilohertz, which was the international distress and calling frequency.
Right.
It had a range of around 300 miles during the day, and if a ship was in trouble, they'd obviously send out an SOS, but there was also a system, if you were off watch, you had an auto alarm, and the ship in distress would send out 12 4-second dashes with a 1 second space in between.
Right.
And this piece of equipment would detect 4 of these dashes and set off an alarm on the bridge, in the radio room, in the radio officer's cabin, and the captain's cabin,
Right.
which meant that you had to get to it fairly quickly to switch it off. The only times it went off with me was due to static, and that would be usually around 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay,
So it's
very unsociable.
Yeah.
I never knew about that system. That's very interesting and vital, really, because I was going to ask you who kept watch while you weren't there, but that kind of answers that question. But quite an advanced system as well, to be able to send those alarms throughout the ship from a signal coming in like that.
Yeah, well, it was just a word alarm system, and it was, as I say, because it was in the captain's cabin, you'd need to get to it fairly rapidly.
Yeah, or else allow it to be a real distress, I suppose. You might get a bit of forgiveness there. That's very interesting. And what kind of, like, all of the communications in and out of the vessel came through you, obviously. So when Portishead or whoever else read your name out or your call sign, and you contacted them, what kind of information would it be that they'd be giving you?
Well, it would be messages from the ship's company, telling you that change your port or next port of call, cargoes, and that sort of thing. And I think it was twice a week on average. The ship would send a position message so that the company knew where you were, and you hadn't sunk in the meantime.
Yeah. And I suppose when you look at nowadays, like how quick we communicate and how readily available news is, it's not that long ago that you're talking about, and how things have advanced so far along. It's quite amazing, really.
Well, if one of the crew members wanted to send a message home, they'd come up and you'd do a little telegram. But there was also what they called a ship letter telegram, which was cheaper. And basically, the message was sent to Portishead Radio, and then they put it in an envelope and posted it.
Right, okay.
And so it would take a few days to get, whereas the telegram would be there
fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And I suppose in that kind of a sense, then you're probably quite a trusted member of the crew, because you at times would be dealing with commercially sensitive information, I suppose, directed towards the captain, and then potentially personally sensitive information where people would be sending messages home and receiving messages. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and you signed the Official Secrets Act, so you weren't allowed to divulge anything that was heard in the radio room.
Yeah,
and
for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And so, what department then did you belong to, Robert? Were you a part of the deck department or the engineering department, or what way did that work?
You were basically alone to yourself. The captain was your boss, and that was it.
Pretty good.
So you were only answerable to him.
Right.
And you were, depending on your sort of time at sea, you were, I suppose, when you were a junior radio officer, you were sort of at third mate level, and you gradually, as you got more sea time, you
became a senior officer.
Became more senior,
Yeah, interesting. And some of the other day-to-day bits and pieces that we were talking about a little bit earlier, the likes of notice to mariners and things like that.
Oh yeah, you got these notice to mariners that'd be sent every week to the ships, but they mightn't arrive for maybe 2 months, depending on where the ship was going. But we had a list of 6 volumes called the Admiralty List of Radio Signals, and in that, every coast station in the world was labelled and had all its frequencies, its times of transmissions. There was another one that covered all weather forecasts and navigational warnings. So these things would change in these over time. So you get this notice to mariners, and you'd have to go through each volume and correct it. And even if it wasn't in the area that you were operating in, you might be going to that area next trip, or your successor might be going there. And
so all the
so
information
you had to fill it all in, and it took a few watches to do that.
Yeah, I remember myself when we used to get the corrections, and sometimes, and I know it was the same for you and probably worse, you mightn't receive them for weeks on end because it wasn't convenient to receive them, or you could have been all that time at sea, and then you got a huge batch at one time.
Yeah.
Was that quite regular for you?
Yeah. And the other thing is, you might get there might be 1 week missing, so after that you didn't know whether to put the corrections in, because you might be correcting something that
was already corrected or not corrected at all. Yeah, real tricky one, that one. Yeah, and like I remember myself when that used to happen, and you have a backlog of so much work to do, and you might have got away with it for a few weeks, and then suddenly you had to get all this done as quick as possible, because like you say, you might be heading there for the next port or whatever. Yeah. And what was life like aboard the ships in general then, Robert? Obviously bigger crews back then that we're used to nowadays.
Yeah, there'd be probably a total crew of around 30, 35, of which I suppose half of those were officers, half were crew. And you'd have there was a crew bar and there was an officers bar, and your off time you could go in there and have, in those days you could have alcohol.
Yeah.
But no, people normally didn't go overboard with the drink. It was just a social.
Yeah. To meet up and have a chat and stuff like that.
And, play cards, have darts, which darts got interesting in rough weather.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
But it was. And some of the captains would be great. There was one particular captain I had who, if he came into the bar in a shirt, an ordinary shirt, he was one of the lads.
Right.
Came in his uniform, he was the captain.
Okay.
And he had the ability to do that.
To blend the two roles, yeah. Very important.
He used to drive a 40-foot articulated truck for relaxation when he went home.
An interesting character indeed. And then for you yourself, I often heard of a radio shack. Like, did you have a dedicated office? Let's call it.
Yeah, there was the radio room, and in that you'd have main transmitter, which covered all the bands. There was the 500 kilohertz band, the medium frequency band, which was for local communications. Then you had 2 megahertz, which was really a sort of radio telephony channel. And then there was 4 megs, these megahertz, 6 megahertz, 8, 12, 16 and 22 megahertz.
Okay.
And depending on the range you were trying to transmit, you picked a frequency.
Yeah.
Normally you'd whatever station you were trying to contact, you'd tune into its frequency first on the receiver. So you'd know you could hear them. So then you could say, well, if I'm hearing them, they'll probably hear me.
Yeah.
But the other thing was this, on the 500 kilohertz frequency, every half hour, a quarter past the hour for 3 minutes, so from 15 minutes to 18 minutes, there was a silence period.
Right.
Nobody to transmit, so that if there was a ship in distress, best chance of hearing it.
Yeah.
And again at 45 to 48 minutes, there was another silence period. So every hour there was 2 silence periods.
Yeah, I remember seeing them marked on the clock.
Yeah, the green section.
Yes.
And then, which wasn't normally monitored, there was on the radio telephony channel 2182 kilohertz. Again, from the hour to 3 minutes past, and from the half hour.
Yeah, I was aware of that one, but I wasn't aware of the one you explained on the 500. So at least you were given a good chance of someone being heard then. Yeah. And would you have communicated much with other ships?
Some shipping companies had radio skids between the different ships. They'd pick a frequency. They had a frequency picked, and you'd listen in. And if there was anybody there, you could have a little chat between the ships. And exchange crew lists and things.
I remember Arklow shipping up until very recently actually were quite famous for that, and I think the R boats would be calling on a Wednesday night, and the S boats would call on a Thursday night, and their positions would be noted then, and I think that was up to fairly recently. And then did you were you around then when telex came in?
I never operated, but there was radio telex, but that was mainly used on the container ships.
Okay.
Because they'd so much communications of where the containers were and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I never operated it.
Okay. And you were telling me earlier then you'd come on watch maybe in the morning, and there could be a few messages to be sent from during the night or whatever, and you had an interesting story there. I thought you were on something a bit quicker.
They were we used to send what they called OBS messages. They were weather observation messages, because ships would be crossing the Pacific or the Atlantic, and there'd be no observations done normally. So the ships would send in weather reports, and on one occasion I was sending. I came on watch, and there was 3 or 4 of them there. So I sent them, and I was sending them to Guam. It was an island in the Pacific. And after I sent 3 of them or something, I sent the 4th one, the guy came back to me, "What you want, a jumbo jet?" And so I eventually realised that the position on one of the messages was wrong. So I went back on the bridge. So put a 2 or a 3 in the wrong spot, So
they thought you were flying across.
so that was corrected. That was grand. But there's basically, if you would say crossing the Pacific, it was a 28-day trip from Japan to the Panama Canal, and you'd be hearing nothing there'd be no local traffic at all, obviously, because nobody was
nothing around.
You might, if you were really bored, you might sort of say, anybody there, sort of thing,
right?
And you might get a reply, and you'd have a chat.
Okay, yeah.
But the chat was all in Morse, obviously.
Yes.
But it was.
And you'd be changing the clocks then, of course, as you went across.
Oh yeah.
Was that your responsibility at the time?
Well, the clocks had changed. The captain would decide when the clocks were changing, but you might change sort of half an hour every couple of days. But in the radio room, we worked a lot on Greenwich Mean Time.
Yes.
And every now and again, we'd be asked, "Can you get a time signal?" And they'd check the chronometer against the station. There was 2 in the States. I think one was in Boston, the other one was in Hawaii, and they were on the same frequencies. But the Boston transmission had a male voice, and the Hawaii transmission had a female voice, so you knew which station you were listening to.
Fairly simple way of figuring it out.
Yeah, but it was.
I remember crossing the international date line. That used to be. I obviously, there's a bit of a tale there with you with that one, but I remember writing in my diary, "This day didn't happen," or there was 2 Tuesdays this week. You know, did that cause you a bit of hassle?
Well, I never knew really what to do when you were doing the radio log. You'd have Tuesday the 15th, and then the next day would be Tuesday the 15th, or
Tuesday the 16th or something. Yeah, very confusing, wasn't it? Yeah.
And so
for something that happened so regularly on ships, it was amazing that there was no kind of format figured out for that.
Yeah, but getting the time signals. I mean, in my day, they were still using sextants for positions.
Yeah.
And
the chronometer that you mentioned there was vitally important. I remember in college talking about the chronometer, and obviously it's less so now, but back in the day, the chronometer, the sextant, the time signal, they were all so crucial to figure out where you were.
Well, that's it. Yeah,
the very basics.
The thing about the chronometer was it didn't maintain perfect time, but it lost time at a predictable rate.
Okay.
So when they came to look at it, and they could say, right, it was checked 3 days ago, and it loses half a second a day, so that means it's
so you could calculate it. So it was steady in one way, but it was losing time in the other. And for your role then on board, like obviously we spoke a little bit at the start about the fact that the radio officer no longer exists, and it morphed into electrician, electrotechnical officer, and the ironic thing about it is now that those with responsibility for electronics and electricity on board have no responsibility for communication anymore.
Yeah.
Did you have to do other jobs apart from the communications? Like, were you involved in the electronics around the ship or not?
No, I was responsible for the maintenance of the radio equipment, the radars, and sort of all that side of it.
Right.
But as far as all the electricals went, that was down to the electrician
on board. Yeah. And when you talk about the equipment then that obviously you were using and responsible for, back then, wasn't the MF area a big long wire that went from one end of the ship to the other? Is that right?
The big long aerial, it went basically the length of the ship.
Yeah.
And then you had the box in the radio room that you could effectively change the length of it for the band you were operating. It didn't physically change it, but it put coils in circuit and out of circuit and things. So it effectively changed the length of it.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing was, my son went to sea there in the when would it be, the 90s, and he was sending us emails.
Yeah.
And we could send him back an email, but I mean, as I say,
and that's only over the space of 20 years. Like, when you think about it, really, it's amazing the advancements that have happened. So obviously, Robert, you were at sea in the 70s, and there was radio officers long before that as well. And you're talking there about sending emails to your son back and forth then in the mid 90s, as we still do today. And we use WhatsApp, and ships' crews have Wi-Fi now on most ships, really, across the world. But when did the transition really kind of take place with going from radio officers and messages coming from radio stations, coast radio stations? When did that actually happen then?
Well, Portishead Radio closed down on the 30th of April 2000, so that was the end of the Morse code transmissions.
So that meant there was no longer a need for radio officers.
There was no need for the radio officers. It all went via satellite communications.
Yeah, and that's when, is that then, to the best of your knowledge, is that when GMDSS came in then, when all the kind of neater boxed up radios came in then?
I'd imagine, that was, GMDSS was probably in just before that. And,
and anyone out there that's interested, deck officers still do have to study Morse code for their exams. They still do the International Code of Signals, so that's all the flags. So there is still, and I think a lot of that has got to do with a nod to the past and having that very, dare I say it, primitive means of communicating, just in case everything else goes wrong, you still have something to be able to communicate with.
Well, the thing with the Morse was that if you were in a situation where there was an awful lot of interference, you could still read the Morse through an awful lot of noise, and
it was still very distinctive.
You could make it out and get your communications backwards and forwards.
Yeah, give us a little bit of Morse there, something off the top of your head. Do you still remember it?
Oh, vaguely, yeah. I mean, we had what we call Q codes. These were 3-letter codes starting with the letter Q, and rather than sending what is the name of your ship in individual letters, you'd send QRA and QRD, where are you bound and where are you from?
Right.
And QTC, I have a message for you. And the one that was easiest to remember was QSQ, which was quick send quack. Have you a doctor on board?
Oh, quick send quack. Very good. Yeah, well remembered. And if anyone remembers the original tone for a text message, the original Nokia tone, here's a bit of geek info for you now. So that tone, and I'm going to get the listeners to go and check it, see if you can find it online, because we can pick our own ringtones nowadays. But that tone is actually Morse code for SMS. So if the listeners want to go and do their own little bit of radio officer
that's right.
Homework, you can have a look at that. I am right on that, Robert.
You are, yes.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, really interesting stuff. The other thing I was going to say to you is about emergencies. So if there was an emergency on board, obviously your role became even more critical, because you had to talk in and out with the ship. Was there any issues like that ever during your time, either with your own ship or other ships?
Well, it was the only time I ever heard of distress. It was about 400 miles away from us, and the ship's doing, 16 knots, so that's a day or more away. But we were in the Pacific. It was actually in the Caribbean, so we'd had to go down through the Panama Canal and up the other side.
There's definitely somebody else closer.
So yeah, but did have one weird experience. It was on the Irish Elm. We were crossing the Pacific, heading must have been heading from the States back to Japan, and the ship used to carry cars from Japan to the States and then coal back from the States to Japan.
Right.
And they had these pontoon decks that they'd put down to make layers for the cars. But when you were carrying the coal, these were on the side decks. And this, I don't know what it was, an albatross or something landed on these things, and it was sitting there for 3 or 4 days, and the lads were giving it food and drink and things. And around midnight one night there was a loud scream, and the guy who was on watch thought somebody'd fallen overboard, so he threw over a lifebelt with the light on it and initiated the Williamson turn. And so came around, and so the alarms went off and everything, and I sort of went up, switched on the transmitter, and what the hell is going on? And then checked numbers on board. Everybody was on board. There was a ship in the distance where you could see the lights, so they decided they better retrieve the lifebelt anyway. So they put a lifeboat over the side, and that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. This lifeboat disappearing out of the loom of the ship about 1,000 or more miles from the nearest land. And they went out, they picked up the lifebelt, did a bit of a check, and couldn't find anyone, so got back to the ship. So the captain put on a case of beer after.
Okay, fair play to him. And I suppose that we're talking about unusual events and distresses and things like that. The story of the Titanic obviously is a one well told, but there was a lot of focus in some of the investigation and documentaries on the radio officer of the Titanic, and you know they had a lot of communication to deal with. But on the night in question, obviously there was a huge amount going on, and there was a lot of urgency, I suppose, for the radio officer there.
Yeah, but it was in those days they used to use. There was this CQ, which means calling all stations, and
Charlie Quebec,
and then so the distress signal was CQD in those days, but there was nobody on watch on the other ships that were nearby to
pick it up.
But I think they stayed at their station as long as they could.
It was tough going for them trying to get those messages out and listening to your story. It's very interesting.
They had, when I was at sea, they had a lifeboat radio, which was, I suppose it was about 3 or 4 foot long and a foot wide, bright yellow, and it actually had 2 handles on the side of it that you could wind a generator.
Oh, really?
And if you were in the lifeboat, you put up a whip aerial, and you could somebody could hand crank this, and you could transmit on it.
Oh, right, okay.
So it was quite a. Used to test it every now and again, but there's actually I think there's 2 or 3 of them up in the Arklow Maritime Museum.
Right,
They've
got a couple on display there. Yeah, very interesting. For the listeners, Robert has very kindly brought his uniform in, and we're going to put some photographs up online about that. But you said you were only responsible as a captain a little bit earlier on, but your uniform was a little bit different. So for anyone listening in, the deck department and the captain would wear gold braid. The engineering department would wear gold braid with a crimson or velvet trim, and then the catering department would have a white trim on their braid, especially in latter days. Tell us about your uniform, Robert. That's a little bit different.
Yeah, it had green. I don't know where the idea of green came from, but it was. You'd start off with just when you were basically trainee on the ship. The first 6 months you went as a trainee, and you had all your certification, but you'd just go as a sort of very junior radio officer. You just have 1 stripe, and then as you progressed over the years, you got a couple of stripes, and then stripes with a diamond.
Yeah. And even as a junior radio officer, would you have been on board on your own, or would you have been with somebody else?
No, you did 6 months with somebody else.
All right, okay.
And basically they
Signed
showed you the real world of
yeah.
from what the college was. But so I did 6 months on a shell tanker, what they called a lightning ship. We were a 66,000 ton ship, and you take a cargo off the big 200,000 or 300,000 tonners.
Yeah, the VLCCs. Yeah,
2 ships had come alongside in Lyme Bay on the south coast of England and pumped the oil.
Ship to ship transfer.
Yeah.
Not done very much anymore, it has to be said either, probably for safety reasons and bits and pieces. 6 months, was that a kind of an average trip length for you?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you'd get half of that at home.
Yeah.
So you did two on, one off.
Very good.
So it was grand. Yeah.
And you sound like you enjoyed your time at it. Is there any big memories that you look back on and think, wow, that was amazing, or I don't want to do it again?
I was quite I enjoyed it, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some days you'd be in a howling gale or something. You're trying to wedge the arm of the radio room chair under the bench so you didn't go sliding across the floor.
Yeah.
While sending Morse wasn't that easy. But then you get the other days where there'd be beautiful blue seas, blue skies, gentle swell. It was nice.
And you got to some very interesting places, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I got sort of Europe. I was on the first Irish ship to go through the Suez Canal after it reopened.
Oh, were you? What ship was that, Robert?
I think that was the Elm.
Right. That's a big event in world affairs, because with the Suez Crisis and all that, it was a major impact on world trade. And wow, that's quite an interesting one. Yeah.
And then I did a few trips on Arab ships, United Arab Shipping Company, and they basically had one ship spaced every 24 hours out to Japan and the Far East.
Wow.
And I got married on a Saturday. My wife and I joined a ship on the Wednesday in Belgium, and we went Barcelona through the Suez Canal around the Gulf, and then we were supposed to get a trip going to Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan and Japan. And I'd been to Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, and I liked them. Never been to Taiwan. I was looking forward to that. But one of the ship that was in front of us picked up some Vietnamese boat people.
Okay.
And they went to Hong Kong. So we got their trip, which was Korea and Japan.
Yes.
So
it's interesting because I was on a container ship on a very similar route than you're describing. Yeah. And I think that's not an accident, because those routes were set up a long, long time ago, probably around your time or a little before, and they're still going today. That those runs, whether they be container ships or whatever they are, even though they're different ship types, they're still on the same runs.
Yeah.
So your wife got a nice cheap honeymoon out of you.
6 months. Although she wasn't. There were certain times when coming across the Indian Ocean rolling 25 degrees each way, she wasn't too impressed with that.
Yeah, exactly. And you said earlier on there that your son was at sea as well, and he worked his way up to masters. So very much a family tradition or connection, I suppose, with your father having been at sea. I think you mentioned your uncle was a captain on the mailboats as well. You went to sea, and then your son. So as with most families, and many families, of course, in Ireland and across, it tends to be generation after generation.
So it's
amazing, really. Look at Robert, it's been really, really good to chat to you, and very interesting. I think the role of the radio officer is very much kind of overlooked and forgotten about, and it's very interesting to look back on it and hear all the little bits and pieces of details. And I think we'll definitely have you back on for another chat again soon. So thanks a million. By the way, before we go, you're enjoying your time having linked up with the lads here at the Maritime Heritage Centre. They're an interesting crew, but you get on
sure
with it.
Is. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's great down here. Yeah. Sort of keep the old seafaring things alive,
Brilliant. And folks, Robert is here most Saturdays, so if you want to hear more about the role of the radio officer and whatever he got up to crossing the Pacific and the Atlantic, I'm sure he'd be delighted to have a chat with you.
Just one last thing, we were known on the ships as the Sparks.
Oh yeah, I meant to ask you about that.
Because in the old days, the transmitter was a spark transmitter, which had two things that created a spark, and that made the electromagnetic wave that was transmitted. So
I was very interested to know that, actually. I that was on my list of questions I forgot to ask you, but that's very interesting to hear about that. So, yeah, you were the Sparks, the Sparky, you were all sorts, but you were fairly important anyway, in fairness to the communication. So, listen, thanks again, Robert. It was great to have you, and steady as she goes. And thanks to Robert for that great insight into the world of the radio officer, of course, a rank that no longer exists at sea, and very interesting stuff. Robert has asked me to pass on that if anyone is interested in radio communications and such like, the history of it, etc., go ahead and have a look at portisheadradio.co.uk, the world's most famous maritime radio station. And now it's time for our Maritime Words of the Week. And for this week's Maritime Words, we have a lovely suggestion by a good friend of the pod, David Carroll. So it's shipshape and Bristol fashion, which comes straight out of our sailing past, and as you'd imagine, from the port of Bristol. So, something to be shipshape. This is part of the older and more obvious half of the phrase. So a ship being shipshape meant that the vessel was properly prepared for sea, with her rigging tidy, her gear stowed away, and nothing loose that could become dangerous once the ship started to roll and pitch. By the 18th century, the term had slipped into everyday language to mean neat, orderly, and ready. Now, the Bristol fashion part, this is where the port of Bristol comes in. And Bristol was one of Britain's most important ports in the age of sail, but it had a unique challenge, one of the highest tidal ranges in the world. Now, ships entering Bristol would often settle on the mud at low tide, sometimes leaning at an awkward angle until the water returned. And because of this, Bristol ships had to be exceptionally well built, carefully stowed, balanced and secure so they wouldn't shift, strain or suffer damage when drying out on the riverbed. A ship that was in Bristol fashion was therefore stowed with extra care and precision, able to handle these harsh tidal conditions without coming into any trouble. So put them together, and when someone said that a vessel was shipshape and Bristol fashion, they meant that she was ready for sea, properly built, carefully stowed, and up to the highest professional standard. So by the early 19th century, the phrase had jumped ashore into everyday speech, where it's still used today to mean everything is in perfect order. And it's a lovely example of how working maritime knowledge, once again, the realities of the tide, the mud, and ship handling quietly shaped our everyday language. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Steady As She Goes. Before we go, we'd like to offer a sincere thank you to all of our guests and to you, our listeners, and the guests who shared their time, knowledge and stories with us for this episode. We're always grateful to those who help keep our maritime history alive by passing it on. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the podcast, please like, subscribe and share it with anyone who has an interest in the sea, ships and our maritime past. You can get in touch with us at steadyasshegowspod@gmail.com, and you'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube. Thanks for listening, and until next time, steady as she goes.